What's going on, guys? RBG here, hitting you with another video on Spider-Man PS5. This is a weird time we're living in where we have a new Avengers game hitting stores in a few months, but for some strange reason we're getting more info on a Spider-Man game that won't be out until next year. It seems like the anticipation is even higher for this game than it is for Avengers, which is totally understandable because Insomniac did a phenomenal job on Spider-Man 1. And as good as Crystal Dynamics is at making AAA games, they still haven't convinced fans that their game will be good. They haven't been consistent in regards to updates, and we're still in the dark on what kind of game this is even gonna be. So yeah, they have a lot of work to do in terms of garnering the praise Marvel Spider-Man has. Now before we dive into today's topic, I want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, BeautifulHalo.com. If you're a man or woman of culture who loves anime, games, and dank memes, then I highly recommend checking out their merch. They have a wide variety of stylish hoodies and other apparel that'll have your friends mad jelly. By using this promotional code, you get 5% off any $49 purchase or higher. So slide on over to BeautifulHalo.com. The link will be in the description box below. But anyways, we've been talking about the alleged leaks regarding Spider-Man 2's story and gameplay, and we got even more rumors from a Reddit user by the name of Utopian Throwaway 90, whose name kind of speaks for itself. This is obviously a throwaway account that's made for all intents and purposes to release information on the newest Spidey game. The person releasing all of the leaks probably works for Sony Entertainment or is closely associated with someone who does work for the company, and they want to remain anonymous to avoid being fired. According to PlayStationLifestyle.net, this Reddit user supposedly received this information from their quote-unquote contact who's familiar with the sequel's development. The leak outlines the rumored details in a long list alleging that Insomniac's follow-up will take place during the winter, 5 to 6 months after the first game's events. Peter Parker then is still mourning Aunt May's death. While he lives with Mary Jane, she doesn't appear much in the narrative's first act. And we heard some of these details a few months ago in another alleged leak where the setting would be in the wintertime, but all of the other details are relatively new, like it essentially taking place in the same year as the first game. I'm assuming this new game will be taking all the City That Never Sleeps DLC into account, since those gave us follow-ups on what Peter Parker and Miles Morales was up to. We still had to deal with those boring Mary Jane stealth missions, but thankfully they won't be making a return. And since we'll be getting more action-oriented gameplay with Miles, his stealth missions will no longer be a thing. I think we were all disappointed that he got reduced to playing very similar to MJ in that game. And while we did somewhat get updates on how he was handling his powers, we didn't get the hands-on experience we wanted. The article says Miles Morales is also supposed to be making a return, but this time as a playable character with his own Spidey powers. This was widely anticipated since the previous game ends with Miles showing Peter Parker his new arachnid theme abilities.
I think it's better that I just I show you.
No. It's pretty weird, right? Not that weird.
However, Utopian Throwaway 90 states that Insomniac isn't sure if they'll let gamers roam the city with Miles just yet. They said, and I quote, "They're still unsure whether to let the player free roam as him, but it isn't being thrown out completely just yet." This has me a little worried because I've been looking forward to seeing how different the web swinging is going to be for Miles compared to Peter. Like when I picture it in my mind, it seems like Miles should be more unrefined and unorthodox since he's still getting used to his spider powers. Speaking of web swinging, the Reddit user goes on to say that the game's web system is going to be more fluid to also become more intricate. It'll start with a feature they called Web Chain, which they state will let Spidey immediately zip to another ledge. This will be complemented with a variety of unique swinging animations that will make traversing New York feel less repetitive. To top it off, the developers are supposed to be creating 3 types of swinging modes so players can customize their experience to what they'd like to play like. These could include realistic, arcade, and hybrid modes. Realistic mode will be the most difficult of the bunch with no assistance, arcade mode will be the easiest, and hybrid mode will be exactly how it was in the PS4 game. To accomplish this, Insomniac will be bringing swing release animations from the PS4 title and adding many more. Reportedly, the studio has 2 animators devoted to working exclusively on swinging release animations. Now, when I read about this web chain mechanic, I thought about the web rush mechanic from the Amazing Spider-Man games, where the game essentially gives you the choice of picking your next move while in slow motion. It's basically like an autopilot feature where Spider-Man just swings from point A to point B in this cool cinematic expression. It was one of those features that wasn't well thought out but very creative. If you ask me, this is going to be a welcome addition to Marvel Spider-Man because Insomniac knows how to execute. Like, they took a lot of things from previous games, particularly Spider-Man 2 the movie game's web swinging. We're talking things like the trick combos and the charge jump. Those are some of the features that Insomniac are going to take even further because it felt like they were missing something, which makes a lot of sense because the dev says that the combo tricks and the charge jumps were last minute additions. I'm hoping they use this time to take even more stuff from Spider-Man 2 as well as the other awesome Spidey games. There's so much they can take from titles like Web of Shadows, like the crazy wall combat. But moving on, the article mentions that this new system will be very similar to that of Batman Arkham Knight, wherein players switch to other Bat family characters. But the Reddit user doesn't specify whether this refers to Arkham Knight's dual play combat mechanic, which lets players switch between, say, Batman and Nightwing on the fly during combat. And I can totally see this being an actual thing when the game comes out. It seems like the Arkham games have laid down the blueprint of what combat should be like in a superhero game. Hell, any game for that matter. I'm just wondering how much control you're going to have over Miles during these moments, and will there be more characters you can control like this? Because the dual play combat wasn't exclusive to just Nightwing and Arkham Knight. You got to fight alongside other characters like Robin and Catwoman too. If this new Spider-Man game is said to feature characters like Venom, then I'd seize the opportunity to make him playable during these kinds of missions as well. Speaking of Venom, the Reddit user claims that Spider-Man 2 will feature Harriet Osborn, who becomes Venom, which is pretty evident since the original title left off with him in critical condition and his father Norman Osborn places him inside a stasis tank with a black goo that looked a lot like the Venom symbiote. However, the Reddit user claims Insomniac intends to subvert expectations on this particular front. The studio further plans to introduce Spider-Man villains such as Carnage and Mysterio to its universe, as well as Eddie Brock. The latter will serve as a major character throughout the narrative. Something I'm wondering is what direction they'll go in with the Eddie Brock and Venom character. Like, are they going to go with the Ultimate Spider-Man Venom where Eddie Brock and Peter Parker were childhood friends turned enemies, or will they go with something more recent like Anti-Venom? That one would be very fitting to the story because Eddie gains the power after being touched by Mr. Negative. If you remember, Norman Osborn was trying to create a serum to cure a genetic disease. He uses Martin Lee as a test subject, but the experiment fails, turning Mr. Lee into Mr. Negative. They never mention what happened to Martin Lee after the events of Spider-Man 1, so they can use him to somehow interact with Eddie and give him the anti-venom powers. For example, in the comics, Eddie is suffering from cancer after separating from the symbiote, but he still has remnants of the Venom symbiote coursing through his blood. Martin touches him and accidentally infuses those remnant blood cells with his dark energy, creating a new symbiote in the form of anti-venom. What's ironic about this is that anti-venom can cure any disease. Being that Norman is looking to find a serum to cure Harry from his unknown illness, they could use anti-venom to achieve this. I know that's a bit of a stretch, but I think it can happen. But whatever they choose to do with Venom, I'm pretty sure it's going to be cool. I'm kind of curious to see what they do to subvert our expectations like they say. Like, the story writers in the first game did an excellent job of introducing us to this seasoned version of Spider-Man, and it seemed like we thought we knew how things would unfold based on stuff we've read in the comics. But there were a few swerves thrown in there to throw us out of the loop. We didn't expect to see a spider-powered Miles Morales coexist with the main Spider-Man. I thought if they were going to do that, Peter had to die and Miles would take up the mantle. And there's also the fact that the writers opted to kill Miles' dad as opposed to killing his mother like in the original story. Stuff like that is what I really enjoyed about Marvel Spider-Man. Having these preconceived notions but being completely wrong about certain assumptions. Hell, as much as I knew Dr. Octavius was going to ultimately become Doc Ock, I was still somewhat shocked because they made me relate to that character and his relationship with Peter Parker. So to see him slowly become that character and become the leader of Sinister Six was executed perfectly. The article also mentions that Norman Osborn is going to accidentally create mutants from a bot super soldier cloning experiment, and as far as that is concerned, I think they'll reference things from the classic lore because it's been a thing since the early 90s back when they introduced the cloning saga. It'd be cool if we get Ben Reilly in the game or some form of reference to him, or they can do the doppelganger Spider-Man since the article mentions that they're going to be botched mutants. So yeah. But anyways guys, I think I'm going to turn it over to you. The leaker mentions that we should be getting an official reveal this summer, so I am hyped. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. As always, I ask that you like or dislike the video. It doesn't have to be a thumbs up, it can be a thumbs down. Any feedback is good feedback and will only help me improve on my channel. But if you really enjoyed this video, it would help me out tremendously if you shared it with all your friends and followers on social media. Sharing really makes a difference. But once again, this is your boy RBG signing out on another video. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.
You want to go back? the war.